Welcome back, everybody. If you remember the last time that Joy and I were on Summit Up together, we were having a conversation and we wanted to get into some training topics, and some technical difficulties happened, but I think it's a little bit of a divine intervention because had those technical difficulties not happened, this conversation wouldn't be taking place. And some conversations, Joy, have happened in the industry recently, especially over the weekend, as of this recording, with regards to the differences in some of the roles that are being advertised or that somebody may hold within the ecosystem. So I thought that it was special for us not only to introduce a new segment that we're going to do every single month to talk about that topic, but to come back on for a special episode really quickly, get this information out there and cover it.
Sounds good.
Before we jump into that, I want to do some quick housekeeping as we do every episode and tell you about some very important things that could help you moving forward in your CMMC journey. And first and foremost, I want to talk about the Summit 732 CFR CMMC Final Rule webinar happening this week. If you haven't registered for it yet, check the link in the comments below. Make sure you register and get all that information that's going to be distributed by Scott Edwards and Jacob Horn. Next, every week, Jacob Horn and Daniel Akridge host the CUI Hotline, an AMA-style show for anything CMMC related, anything 32 CFR related, anything that you need to know to help you better on this journey. In addition to that, Summit 7 has a free Pathfinder tool for the organizations that are trying to figure out exactly where they need to go or how to get started to obtain their CMMC certification. And the link for that is also in the comments of this show. And there's one more resource, Joy, and I think you can help us a little bit more on it. Last episode, we were talking about SPRS scoring and level 1 and some of the questions from the town hall with regards to it. And I know that we both know somebody in the industry that she hosts every week a SPRS scoring training webinar. And I think you have some updates with regards to that if you wanted to let everybody know.
Yeah, I reached out to Corinne Weiss, W-I-S-E, on LinkedIn. She has an SPRS Friday, and I see it every Friday morning, the advertisement for join us. If you have any questions about leveraging the SPRS platform, I had mentioned that there's a lot of updates that are taking place to that platform. And one of the things in answer to the questions around entering a score for level 1, that if you use the historical scoring system for all of the CMMC or the NIST 800-171 controls, you would have a huge deficit in your score. It would be a negative instead of a positive up to a 110. And people are very concerned about how that would be reflected in SPRS. So I reached out to Corinne, asked her if she's updating her content to include just level 1 and all of those updates. And indeed she is. So we'll see if we can't get a link to that in the notes for our session today so that everybody that's interested can reach out and join in for that, because she's an incredible teacher and it's really important to understand how that scoring works.
I agree. I actually have oftentimes, maybe on 3 occasions, attended just to see what it was. I think it's important for us to know that there are free resources available and to distribute the information about the free quality resources that are available to help people, in addition to some of the paid resources. And we're going to talk about some of the paid resources on this episode. We're going to debut a new segment, and the segment's going to be called Bursts of Joy, right? And Bursts of Joy, obviously, because I get to sit across the screen from Joy Beeland every month, and every time that she speaks, it's like a burst of happiness that comes through. But what we want her to do is we want her to talk about what she is very deeply knowledgeable about, right? Joy Beeland is our Summit 7 in-house training guru, vibe creator, everything to the stars. She sits on boards for certain industry certification companies and takes a very a large amount of pride in the fact that she has not only contributed to the bettering of other professionals in multiple industries, but also anytime that you talk about CCP training materials, you have to talk about Joy Beeland in the conversation, because she is one of the first authors of one of the first CCP training books. And now that I have boosted Joy up enough, this is Bursts of Joy, and we are seriously just going to talk about something, Joy, that this weekend both of us had conversations about. Both of us obviously saw if we were on LinkedIn, and it is the difference in between certificates and certifications, particularly when it comes to certified professionals and registered practitioners in the CMMC ecosystem. And
Yeah.
I want to know, Joy, my first question for you to lead it off is, in your opinion, as a provisional instructor, you teach the CCP. You also, I think, were a part of the group that was one of the first registered practitioners. You went through the training, so did I. What do you think, in your opinion, are the three most important details that separate the certified CMMC, the CMMC certified professional designation certification, and the registered practitioner certificate?
Well, I would say the biggest difference is that the CCP is going to give you a depth of knowledge all the way through NIST 800 171A, both level 1 and level 2 controls, a much more intimate experience, if you will, and how would I properly implement those controls with a qualified instructor who generally is live. Most of the CCP classes are live, so you're interacting with an instructor. You're able to ask questions, at least to chat with them. The RP, or the Registered Practitioner training, only covers level 1 for FCI, first of all. So let's be clear, that's 17 controls versus 110 controls. So it's the very basic. The scoping doesn't get into how do I really properly scope anything beyond the FCI environment. The understanding of the ecosystem is really limited to, I'm going to be a consultant out there. How do I engage with the cyber AB? Not all of the other official, sources of information. And then, of course, we have the contract information. How do you read a contract to understand what those requirements are? So at a high level, the RP covers way less information in a much smaller amount of time than the CCP. So that's the biggest difference right there. If you were to also say, well, how would I test the knowledge of somebody that's an RP versus a CCP? The RP is kind of like going through security awareness training, if you will, that you watch a module and then you're given a few questions and you have an attempt to get those questions right, just a few questions. Now, you can have anything else open on your computer that you want to, right? You're not being forced to pay attention to just that. So you can get the answers from other places. And if you miss some of those answers, you can go back and you can answer them again. Same questions, but this time, do you have the ability to answer them the right way? So the RP is really like that security awareness training, that it's not like high stakes. If you're not getting the answers correct, you can get the information in order to answer those questions from anywhere at the time that you're taking the test. You move on to the next module, like security awareness training would allow you to do. And then when you're done with all these different modules, I think that there are 7 modules, then you are awarded this certificate, which means I did some limited training in a very loosely controlled environment for a testing of that knowledge. And now I have a certificate that I have done that, right? The CCP is a very, very controlled environment for the exam. It's a 3-hour proctored exam. So you can take it remotely, but they will know if anything else opens up on your computer, and they'll have you show on your camera where everything else is in relation to your actual desk. Have you taken a proctored exam before, Jason?
Yeah, my CCP exam was proctored. Fun fact about me, actually, I'd like to think that I'm not a stupid person, right? I'm very intelligent, but I have the worst test anxiety, period. And when going into those proctored situations, I break out hives. I actually, when I took my CCP exam, the lady came in and she thought, are you okay? I was just rubbing my eyes because I was getting dizzy. I don't know what it is. I know the stuff. I passed the test, obviously. I teach the stuff. For some reason, when you get into those situations, I don't understand. It's high stress, something about giving up my phone and my keys and my wallet. I don't know. I'm more worried about are they going to take off with my stuff than if I'm going to pass the test. I'm not sure. But yeah, it's a very high tense situation. But having a proctored exam, I think, is the thing that separates it, right? Having that the need to apply the knowledge in this situation and having that being in a controlled environment. One of the key things that you pointed out, Joy, was when you take the RP training, you could have anything else open, including Google, to Google
Yeah.
the answers. But you don't need to Google the answers, because if you get them wrong, you can, again, just retake the same section over and over again until you get it right, because it's a check the box for completion and the granularity. I do have a question for you with regards to that, though. I know it's possible. The registered practitioner training, you can sign up for it, pay for it, take it, and receive a certificate the same day. Is that possible with the CCP?
No, the fastest that I've seen anyone get through is a 3-day class for the CCP, just the depth of information that needs to be covered in that class. And when you do the CCP, you're following the blueprint that the Cyber AB has on the website for the CCP. And you can go right there to the Cyber AB website under CMMC ecosystem. For assessors, go down to the CCP, click on CCP Blueprint, and you'll see everything included in that training. You can't get through that training in, a few hours like you can with the RP. Absolutely not. It's they want to make sure that you've actually sat through the class with a qualified instructor. You have to complete the class in order to sit for the exam. Like you can't even sign up for the exam without Keiko sending you the link after you've taken the class, and they receive the confirmation from the training provider that you've taken the class. Then you can use that link to sign up for the exam. So it's a very controlled methodology that requires a lot more time commitment and, frankly, a little bit of money, a little bit more money to show that you've invested in receiving the appropriate training for consulting and assessing.
Well, that brings up a good point, because you kind of get what you pay for, right? Like you pay the RP certifications, what, $500, $250 or something like that. Yeah, I forgot. It's been so long since I, paid the fee. It was like 5 years ago at this point. And I think when I'm asked, and I'm just going to give my own opinion on the matter, like as far as the differences in between, when I'm asked now, we are at the beginning. If you'd asked me 5 years ago, I would recommend anybody that thought they wanted to get into the CMMC space to take the RP training, because it was the training that was offered, and it was the only one that was specific to the CMMC practice. That was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And then we got certified positions, and now certified takes the precedence. And it takes the precedence, especially when it comes to providers, managed service, external service providers, consultants, things of that nature. And it should take the precedence. Where the RP is still beneficial is for these organizations seeking assessment or certification to get their staff more aware of what's going on, and they can't afford to send everybody through a $3,000 CCP class, right? To increase the awareness of the entire organization that has to achieve CMMC, because we always talk about cultural changes. Well, a cultural change when everybody's a CCP, that could be expensive. Maybe if you dumb it down a little bit, give them some general understanding, I think that benefits the organization more. But I think when it comes to, and the topics in LinkedIn that we are specifically attaching this conversation we're having right now to, when it comes to the provider and somebody that's going to guide you on your journey, you don't want the person that's looked on YouTube for 8 hours to learn how to do open heart surgery. You want the person that's been to medical school.
100%.
And that's the way that it goes. On that, I want to segue into the second question. From the perspective of someone that works for an OSC, because we are an OSC seeking certification, we are also a provider who is wanting to become a CCP. So you were talking to somebody who works at OSC, they want to be a CCP. How would your training, how would you tell them that their CCP training would benefit them to help their organization prepare for CMMC? So this is from the perspective of an OSC employee.
Yeah, it's so robust. The CCP training is so robust. Like, first of all, you understand everything about the regulatory landscape. So this is something that, of course, you and Jacob Horn are focusing on all the time. But most OSCs really are not understanding the implications for 48 CFR, 32 CFR, the FAR rule, all of the updates to 7012, 7019, 2021, how they would impact their own organization. So at the high level, that's like, first of all, they're understanding what kind of rules are we playing by. Okay. Second of all, they're able to understand the difference between what the DoD is putting out as an authoritative voice and what the Cyber AB is putting out as an authoritative voice, because both of those entities are authoritative for the CMMC program.
Absolutely.
By and large, the DoD is driving it, and the Cyber AB is like doing their best to keep up, like all of us. But they're really the ones that will be implementing that program, the CMMC program, to validate the implementation of NIST 800-171. But then you learn how to navigate all of the official documentation. So as an OSC, for example, I can't tell you how many times I hear and recently just witnessed in conducting a JSVA assessment. This is so commonplace, it could make me cry. The amount of organizations that are not aware of NIST 800-171A, right?
Absolutely.
All that they know is they've seen in DFAR 7012, maybe NIST 800-171 is referenced. They know that R2 is the version that they're going to be leveraging. And then it comes time for they think that they're ready for their assessment, and they find out that there's 320 assessment objectives that line by line are going to be validated by an assessor. And it's shocking. The fact that that even happens to me is just heartbreaking, because they've spent so much time and resources in getting ready. And yet it's like the first week of 16-week training program to run a marathon, and they think that they're ready. So that's one of the things that I think the OSC needs to look at is, what are all the different source documents that I need to be leveraging? Where do I go for that authoritative information? And then we get into the actual scoping. And Jason, you and I know scoping done correctly can save an organization hundreds of thousands of dollars. Scoping done incorrectly is flushing money down the toilet, right? Why would you not want to start off your CMMC journey by understanding exactly the people, the technology, the facilities, and the data that you truly have to protect, that is going to be validated by an assessor, versus that which you don't have to put into scope, and you can save all of that money?
We both teach the CCP class. The portion of the classes that I've taught thus far that gets the most questions is scoping.
Yeah.
100%.
So.
Yeah, because you said it's so vital. I am a proponent. I stand on the soapbox multiple times to talk about 313 data flow control and how important it is to the grand scheme of things. But people overlook that, because we talk about there's a difference between having a environment that is capable of protecting CUI and then actually protecting the CUI within that environment. You could still you could get a CMMC certification and still be in violation of compliance with DFAR 7012 and still get in trouble because you haven't properly scoped things, right? So you are 100% right that is important. Joy, how do you feel as though with regards, like, if I were to become a CCP and I was working in OSA and I'm thinking about it, and when it comes to the requirements, Jacob and I always talk about the requirements that are in CMMC, and how organizations think they know what they're doing, but they really don't understand the requirements. They really don't know, like you said, 171A exists. What kind of elements of the CCP training exist for organizations to better understand maybe the perspective of an assessor, not just an implementer, but the assessor? Like, what perspective would an assessor take?
Well, I think that the cool thing about that is that if you're an OSA getting ready for your assessment, you want to be able to predict to the biggest extent possible what the assessor is going to be asking you for. Okay. So, for example, when you go through the CCP and the CCA classes and you see it from the perspective of an assessor, you understand how are they going to group the domains? Who are they going to want to speak to? What kind of documentation are they expecting for you to hand them? How far in advance of the assessment do I need to have that documentation ready? What is the plan as we go through the assessment? Like, what would that flow look like? How do I prove to them I'm ready in phase one of the assessment, in picking my C3PAO or the assessor, certified third-party assessor organization? All of these questions, the more prepared you are for them and to have at the ready whatever they're going to be asking for and looking for, the better your chances of passing that assessment, right? To me, it's like, I can't imagine the amount of anxiety it quells for somebody whose ass is on the line, right? 100%. They're the one who's going to have to get their organization through this. So you may have an assessment official, somebody high up at the organization, that's going to be signing the contract and saying, yes, I'm responsible. But ultimately, you and I both know the reality of the situation is it's generally somebody in IT or on the cyber team, maybe working with, if they're big enough, they might also have a GRC person that they're collaborating with and helping to get ready. But if I were those people, I'd want to know, what is an assessor going to look for every single assessment objective? And how can I be ready with not just one, but 2 or 3 different ways of proving to them that we've implemented it correctly?
Yeah, I think from the perspective, I agree with that actually wholeheartedly. I think from the perspective, if we're doing a comparison and apples to apples, what you mentioned about the RP training is that the RP training only covers the level 1 practices, FC. The RPA, now that's another training that's ancillary to that, that goes in detail. And now you know that there's 110 practices that exist at that level, right? But you don't know what those 110 practices really are. You do not get into that level of granularity into the education of the professional until you get to the CCP course, until
Right. Now,
you get to that.
I want to ask you a question.
Oh
I
no,
don't
that's
mean to
not how
cut
this
you off,
works.
but I got all
This is
excited.
burst of joy, not burst of Jason.
I know, but I think you'll like this question. Let's say that you are an OSA and you're going to do a self-assessment. You find out that you won't have to have a C3PAO, which we know is going to be a very, very small percent of contractors. But would there be any value in you still putting one of your employees through the CCP class, Jason?
Absolutely. So you were talking to the wrong one there. I am a firm component. If it's possible, you go through the CCP. People reach out in my inbox constantly and ask me, what should I do? How do I do this? I don't have the money to do that. I want to get started in the industry. CCP is a big investment, and it's for people that I think are committed, are going to be around for a while, right? Not just the average fly in the pan. I know we've plugged resources on here, but I recommend people take the RP training to get the general understanding, because that's the information that's been distributed by the body that's in charge of it, right? So you're going to take that, at least that you have that done. But I also recommend the GRC Academy CMMC training. We haven't mentioned that yet. And I know for a fact that it is extremely valuable. It has great reviews, and there's a lot of thought that goes into it, and the person behind it, obviously. So when we talk about it, that, obviously that's not a free resource, and the RP is not a free resource. But if you combine those two for the everyday OSC employee, they're in much better shape. But I still recommend, if you have the ability, not just to have one CCP on staff, because you train one CCP, they'll end up working for somebody else, and then you're just up the creek without a paddle with regards to your internal competency and skill. But to get as many people as you could possibly afford through the training, because there's a lot on the line for this, and it's not just DoD specific anymore. It's going to evolve further. So this is going to be a big part of the way of life of your organization. So full culture change, as we said, but more so, you're adding regulations to a previously unregulated industry, and you're going to need expertise. And that expertise externally can get pretty expensive. So you want to kind of compensate for the ability, for the money resources wherever you can. And $1,000 for an individual staff member is a lot different than $3,000 for an individual staff member, or $100,000 for an external resource.
Yeah, and the OSCs that are going to be able to do a self-attestation, the thing that is so important about the CCP is that they're going to want to do a self-assessment at the same level of rigor that an external auditor would perform on their system. And that's how they are going to attest, with the official signing off, submit an SSP that makes sense, submit POAM and all of their internal self-assessment report documentation in the SPRS system, and feel like that actually carries depth and weight equivalent to what a certified third-party assessment organization would be doing on their behalf. That's the mandate. The mandate from the DoD, and not just the DoD, the mandate from the CMMC final rule is that you're using the same rigor in conducting a self-assessment as you are if a third party is coming in to audit you at level 2. And so having a CCP on staff, even for the self-assessment, in my mind, that if I was the assessment official signing off on that, I'd have it no other way. An RP is absolutely not acceptable for the level of talent needed in order to do that level of rigor that's required. It would only be a CCP or a CCA.
Yeah, the everyday Joe that has to carry out business operations, RP is fine. The everyday Joe that has to be the person that's attesting to something, has to validate whether scores exist. It has to be something more elevated for the organization. I couldn't agree with that anymore. Now, we've talked about from the perspective of the OSC, OSA, right? Like how does this benefit me? Now, we both work at a provider. We are classified as an external service provider, managed service provider, however you want to classify it in the grand scheme. And so there are certain ways the CCP training could be leveraged from our positions to help our clients more so. How do you see a way that the CCP training helps ESP client or ESP providers, external service providers, provides their clients better?
Well, I don't see it any different from what I just said about the OSA. Because ultimately, who's responsible for an organization to get their CMMC level 2 certification and to maintain that security posture? I don't care who they hire as an ESP. I care not. The ultimate accountability for that comes down to the OSA. So whether it's an internal resource or an external resource they are leveraging to implement those controls and then maintain it on their behalf, they need to know that they are ultimately responsible for it. So as such, if I'm an MSP or an MSSP out there, and I'm the one who's performing those capabilities on behalf of an organization who's ultimately accountable and responsible for this, my contract, my service level agreement, and my services had better align perfectly with what I'm expected to be delivering for CMMC level 2, right? And there was an exercise I went through when I worked at Edwards Performance Solutions with Matt Hoper. You know, Matt, we all know and love Matt. And I said to Matt, if we were to take the 110 controls and then just highlight which of these most MSPs are going to touch in one way, shape, or form, which of these do you feel would have coverage through the 110? Do you know, even the most basic MSP, most basic IT services where they say, we don't do security, we just do the IT part of it. You're going to cover like 60% of those controls. You're going to touch them in some way, right? So how you do that, how you carry out that capability 100% affects the and impacts the defense industrial base clients that you're supporting. So that's at the most minimal. If you were to look at an MSP who also does security services, who also does on-prem, who also helps with all of their security awareness training, who helps with the incident response, you have 100% coverage, Jason, in some way. We looked at every single assessment objective in some way. That external service provider can touch every single one of the controls. So why would you not go through that same level of investment to make sure that your staff have a minimum of the CCP? Now, this is one area that I would say, please, I hope to God, you do not spend money on the RP. If you are an external service provider, do not waste one penny, not one penny on the RP, because it's so grossly insufficient to get you to where you need to be. I said it out loud. I did.
I know.
And I'm going to stand behind it.
You saw my eyes. Like this is called burst of joy. Okay. No. Listen. As general understanding goes, the RP condition is great, and I think it's now it has been relegated down to the general understanding and comprehension type certificate, right? We know we're here for the ride. That's it. It is not at all, and I back you 100%, intended for the provider, any provider at any level. That has to be a certified with what's on the line, with the questions that are being asked. Also, just to cover the difference in the training, the things that you provide, the qualities and capabilities that you are able to provide, or at least you understand and have comprehension of as a CCP, when it comes to the provider spectrum, it's everything that you do or you're required to do, right? Yeah. And you need the goal of this from the external service provider's perspective in the grand scheme of CMMC is the SRM is going to be God.
Yeah.
The way the shared responsibility matrix defines things and the way that that is written and the way that an organization that receives it, interprets it, and leverages it and does whatever processes on the back end, that is going to be the defining thing for assessments. Period. Point blank. End of sentence. If you cannot interpret the SRM from your provider, you will fail your assessment.
Yeah.
That's the only way to put it. The only way you're going to be able to interpret that SRM is to be trained on all the controls that are going to be applicable to that SRM. Because if you went to the RP training, somebody would be saying, yeah, we do this, and it's 17 things saying yes or no, not as a part of 313.B. It's just, it's deeper, it's more in depth. And then we talk about CMMC false starts when it comes to assessments. False starts is the coin term that Jacob has given. When you show up to C3PO and you're like, I'm ready for assessment, and they're like, and you give them your documentation, and they're like, no, you're not. Try again. And they send you back. We heard that happening during the JSVA stress test that just took place. A lot more common happenings of that. And that's more lack of competency, lack of skill, lack of awareness of what needs to happen. Lack of competency, lack of skill, and lack of awareness that wouldn't happen if that person were a CCP.
Agreed.
Those are things that are covered. You cover the assessment process. I can't speak and tell you exactly what's on the test, but I'll tell you, if you're reading for the test, know the cap. Yep. As a CCP, know the cap. What you do, what your role is, and what you're supposed to do. Pretty important when it comes to testing. Last question. Yeah. Last question, then we're going to get out of here, Joy. This has been a great episode. I love this segment. The last thing is that we did something as an organization, and we used our CCP training, our teaching techniques and capabilities, and some people in the organization launched a security culture, wanted to improve the security culture, leveraging their training. Yeah. And I want you to tell me how you believe, as an MSP going for their own CMMC level 2 certification, impacts not only the outward perspective, but the inside security culture of the organization.
If you don't have leadership buy-in and support for the entire culture of the organization to shift in support of a huge initiative that CMMC is, you are not going to be successful. You may get to what a lot of people think is the finish line to be able to get through an assessment, but to be able to maintain that posture in a cost-effective manner, to have it be something that the entire organization understands and supports for the long term, is going to fail. And this is with any security program, but this is now a necessity, right? This isn't something that we're opting into. The organizations who have to get a CMMC level 2 certification necessarily have to change everything about their security culture. And at Summit 7, like, one of the things, I'm saying this all the time on LinkedIn, I'm like, this is such a great organization. I'm going to get a little personal for a minute here. I am a huge proponent of the human element in cybersecurity, because I truly believe if you don't change people's behavior, it doesn't matter what kind of technical controls you have in place, right? Well, with CMMC, if you don't have the why of it as your foundation, and then the how of it spread through every single business unit, not just IT, not just cyber, not just compliance, but let's talk about a sales department who receives RFPs and they want to understand how they can better help their customers. They receive the scoping details. Like, how much information do we receive from external customers on a regular basis? Our marketing team is going to receive solicitations. They're going to be out there scouring the internet looking for information. It is a junkyard of all kinds of phishing and malicious websites that you wade through as an organization, no matter what your line of business is. But why would you focus only on the people who are doing the technical implementation or the compliance and the GRC controls for the culture? The culture is every single person that walks in and swipes their badge, every single person that sees a visitor in the lobby and knows that they are waiting for an escort before they're allowed through the doors. right? The culture is, I'm not going to open this unless I know who it came from, or I have a safe way of opening this to make sure that it doesn't impact the security of our system. The culture is, I'm not going to email a password to somebody, right? The culture is every one of those things. And so as we stand up CMMC internally, we're not just putting the CCP opportunity in front of our IT, our MSP, and our security operations folks. Jason, you know as well as I do, we have salespeople that have gone through the CCP. We have marketing people that have gone through the CCP. We have people in finance. We looked at the entire ecosystem, if you will, of Summit 7 and said, how do we make this holistic? And our leaders are amazing in the fact that not only do they support that, but they have supported ongoing security ambassadors, right? The way that we're going and getting ready for our own CMMC assessment, we have an upcoming lunch and learn for the entire company to talk about what this means for us. And the security ambassadors every month are given a group of controls to talk through with every single business unit and how it applies to their own business unit, not just IT, not just cyber. All of this for me is really what, and it also is predicated on the fact that the very first companies that went through a JSVA, I called them and I talked to the CTO and the CIO who had walked through that journey. This is 3 years ago now that we had the very first ones coming through.
Yeah, about 2.5, yeah.
And they said, well, we had the IT part of it done in 12 months. It took a full 12 months additional for the company, the people and the processes to catch up with what we had done with technology. And they flat out said, had we had our DIBCAC assessment at the end of that first 12 months with just the technical implementation, we would have failed. That says everything.
Yeah.
Right?
So for me, it all comes down to the path of least resistance when trying to accomplish the mission. And the path of least resistance, usually you get the most resistance when you make changes to an environment because there is that in the dark feeling or that not knowing what's happening or not understanding or comprehending the change, right? And as a good professional, what you should do is communicate the change, to level expectations, to let people know not only are we're not doing this, we're not cutting off your access to AutoCAD or whatever cool software that you have because we're bad guys and we want to. We have to. There's regulations that are applied to it for us to keep it. And this is the reasoning behind it. The more that you educate the end user, the more that you educate the entire organization as to why these changes are happening. This is a change in culture. Yeah. And that's exactly what it is. And to get that buy-in that you need for it to be successful, you have to be transparent in communications. If you are not, it's the old rebel, like somebody's going to rebel against you. If they don't know what's going on, they're going to be the outlaw. And I don't want to do multi-factor authentication. And then here 10 years later, old Joe that was standing on business, he's the subject of some sort of threat that's broken through. This has been an outstanding conversation, and I think that it started what I hope is a much greater conversation as to level setting expectations when it comes to credentialed roles within the ecosystem and understanding that there is value in every one of those roles, but the value is in making sure that you understand what their intent is to deliver and what that you can get out of them. You don't want to go to the junkyard expecting to get a brand new Mercedes, right? And I think that that's kind of what we want to steer people with.
Yeah.
You got anything else for the group?
I want to end with kind of making a bold statement.
Oh no.
I know.
Dustin, get the dump
button. Not
get
us into too much hot water here.
Producer Dustin, get the dump button ready.
The RP designation is really something that had been stood up originally with the intention of having it be
removed,
a temporary role, so that once the actual curricula and boot camp was completed for the CCP, that would be removed as an option. And I think that there was some financial implications to that happening for the Cyber AB. I mean, they've gone a long time without having an actual the ability to get out there and certify assessors that are certifying organizations. We've been on hold, so they've been financially treading water, leaving the RP in place. I would encourage any organization that's looking for consulting to get ready for their CMMC assessment to look well beyond the RP and not waste the money if that is the only credential that an individual might have in helping them with their assessment. Whether you're consulting or assessing, the foundational layer of knowledge that is the most respected, that will give you the most bang for the buck, is going to be the CCP, period.
Yeah, and so I agree. I'm not here to bash the RP program. I just, again, it is all important that you make sure that people clearly understand what they're going to get. And the difference is that one is going to cost maybe the same in some instances. I've seen gap analysis from an RP and from a CCP cost the same. And I'm going to tell you, they're not the same product.
Mm-mm.
They're not. And you are putting your contracts on the line. You're putting the well-being of your organization and everybody that works for you on the line, in the hopes that this person's going to be the flash in the pan, one RP that turns out to be something special. I agree with you. That was supposed to be temporary. This is not going to be a temporary staple of our show. Burst of Joy is here to stay. I'm glad that we have him, and we'll see you next week, folks.